Welcome back. So where we left off in the last video, as I said, we were going to start actually doing the work on the electronics, um, beginning with the tone board. And I've shown you in the prior video the kit that I had. And these are the parts for the tone board. And you'll see I've sorted them out. And it makes it much easier when you're replacing things if you sort your parts first. The upper capacitors there are, I believe it's 2.2, 3.3, 4.7. And then you have the larger 220 one. Then you have the non-polarized WEMAs, which are 1.0 UF. And then you have two types of transistors. And that's what we're going to change. I did want to also point out to you in the, you should keep your service manual handy. If we turn to the page with, this is the figure for the, that's the tone board. And you'll see the different spots of where you're going to be changing things. If you recall, I also said that things were numbered. So for example, if we look at a, let's look at a capacitor, like the large capacitor there, CE25. Okay, if I go into the manual, let me get to the right page, you'll see, CE25, 220 UF, 35 volts. And if I pull up the one that's the 220, let's see if we get the camera to focus. It's 220 UF, 50 volts. You could always go higher on voltage. You just don't want to change the unifarads there. You don't want to change the farads. Okay. So with that information, as I said in the prior video, in order to take out the tone board, we have to remove the nuts from the bass, mid, and treble potentiometers. But before we do that, I said I was going to show you different ways of desoldering in case you don't have, like I do, the desoldering gun. As you can see, I've fired up the soldering iron. The desoldering gun is also fired up. I have a small wet sponge to clean the tips and also the Brillo looking things. So I'm going to try and show you what it's like to use solder braid versus solder sucker, and then how well it works with the desoldering gun. And I'm going to pick one here for a capacitor that has to be changed, and I'm just going to put a little bit of this flux here, if I can get this to, there we go. And I'm going to put a little flux on the solder braid itself, and I'm going to use my, sorry about the shaking, I'm going to use my soldering iron, and hopefully I can get this on camera, and you're going to see why I'm not really a fan of solder braid. You want to get the braid on there and draw the solder away from the spot. And some of it came. Let's try that again. Get some heat on there so it starts to draw away the solder. And it's done a fairly decent job. I can see the barrel and stuff. And hopefully that was clear. And now I'm going to do the same thing. But I'm going to use the solder sucker. I've primed it. Hard to see. And I'm going to do the one adjacent, which is the other leg of the capacitor. And you'll see I'm going to melt the solder. It helps if I get my finger over the button. I'm going to melt the solder there, and it's melted, and I sucked it away, and that worked pretty well. Okay, So that shows you the two things. It's very time consuming with the braid. It's a little better with the solder sucker. Okay, so to get the tone board out, we want to remove those nuts from the board. And this is a 12 millimeter socket. And you notice I don't have to use a ratchet. They're not put on there very tight. They're just snug. And they each have a washer within two. That's the first one. Get the second one. Keep them together. Remember, I have a little parts box too. I can put them in. And finally, this one. And you see it's starting to come loose already. And that's 3. So now, to get the tone board to where you can operate on it, is you're going to push these little levers out of the way. And you see I have, and be gentle, it'll move. And see, you can flip it right over. And there is the tone board. Okay, and I'm going to leave that closer. The two solder spots we were working on before for this large capacitor, and I can't tell right now. It may actually be glued down. Some of them you'll find they're glued, and if they are glued to the board, all you have to do to get them loose is use a little heat gun on the back and aim it at the thing, and it'll loosen up the glue, and you'll be able to pull it up. It'll look like gum. So let's just take a look using the desoldering iron, and now that I can pull on the capacitor, yeah, see, that's coming out. Whoop! That's how you pull the solder out. And now I've been able to break loose. And it was glued. And the heat, see, that's the glue that some of them will have. And you can clean that up. But if we wanted to change that now, there's a couple things I wanted to point out to you. And hopefully I can zoom this in so you can see. Oh, yeah. Okay. So looking at this, you'll see, and you wanted to make sure which way it came out too, because you have a plus and a minus side. The minus side always has the stripe, but the board will actually show you, I probably have to move that out of the way a little bit. You see the little plus sign? Can you see? In your picture, it would be upper right next to HE, whatever there. It's for this capacitor. And the capacitors will always have, you can see on these lower ones here, a plus sign. So that's telling me the plus is going inbound of the board and the minus is outboard. Okay, and that's the 220. And you always check the value on what came out, because the manual can have errors. As a matter of fact, this manual does have an error when you're setting the bias on this. But you see it's 220, 35 volt. We're going to put in, and I like to do these one at a time, we're going to put in let me spin it around, 220, let me get a 50 volt. There you go. So how do you do that? And we don't have to re-glue these. So we said the plus side is inbound. That would mean that the stripe would be outboard. You put it in through the holes, and you can see the other side. And you hold it down right up against the board and just give these a little bend, and that'll hold them in place. And we can even just kind of set that like that so you can see. Okay, so doing these one at a time, how do we solder them in place? Well, first of all, depending on which flux you use, I'm going to try this. This is new for me in the syringe. I'm going to put a little flux on there and a little flux on there. And this is very easy to do. And I'm going to get my soldering iron, which I've cleaned the tip meanwhile. Nice, clean, shiny tip. Let's see if I can get it on the camera. Yeah, see it? And what I'm going to do, and this will be interesting, do it while I'm on camera, is I'm going to get a little blob of solder, not too much, on there and solder it in place. And do the same thing with the other side. A little blob of solder. You can move it around a little bit and we're done. So I'll get you a close-up of that in a second. That's really all it takes. You don't have to put gobs. You want it to be nice and shiny. And so let's get a close-up on that. And you can see. And that one on that side, I could probably just do a little better. But remember, I was working from behind the camera, not with my normal light, headlight. That one is done. And once that one is done, you'll take your nippers, keep track of where these go, I'm gonna clip that one, and I clip that one, and it's done. So I don't have to show you each and every one, but I did want to show you first a capacitor. I'm going to show you a transistor and the 3 legs on a transistor. But I did want to point out some things. If you're not sure where something is mounted, you can see the traces, and I'm going to shine a light. And the traces there will show you where things are. So for example, very easy to find that transistor right there because it's near the end. And if we come around the other side, you'll find it. And you'll find where the legs go too. And fortunately on the, again, on the Marantz, they tell you the ECB and the direction. And the replacements are going to go in the same direction. But when you get a kit, how do you know which ones go are replaced? What's the new number for them? And fortunately, as I said, when I order from a particular supplier on eBay, his instructions tell you exactly. If it's this number, they get replaced with those. And if you recall, I showed you there were 2 sets of transistors for this board. You also see the potentiometers. And the way I'm going to clean them is I'm literally going to desolder them, take them off the board, and then put them back on. But let's show you a transistor. And that transistor here should be these 3 here. And they'll be top to bottom, 1, 2, 3. And if you desolder something that is adjacent, don't worry about it, because I need my glasses. You'll be able to, let's move the camera. You'll be able to just solder it back when you're done. When you solder in the new part. Okay, so we're gonna get the desoldering iron. Let's bring the cord around. And again, let's look for positioning. I said that one was very close to the edge. Let me see. Which one are we going to do? We're going to do this HE04, which is right about here. And let me see the legs. Okay, it's between two resistors, and then there's nothing below it. So that would be, and I have my finger actually on the resistor, so I could literally feel it wiggle. And then you have this one here, and I can feel that. See it wiggling? And then finally, that one. And you can see all three wiggle. And sometimes you have to give them a little push because they'll still be stuck to the side of the barrel in the, and you can see all three wiggling. So now I can pull this out. Ooh, there we go. I've pulled out the transistor, the three legs. And again, Marantz makes it very easy for you to see which direction they go. So what transistor is this? Okay, this is, let's get it on the camera, A750. Okay, I go over to the instructions, and I'm actually going to show you. Okay, so this is a perfect case of where what's on the board doesn't match the manual, which for HE04, I'm going to turn this around. Hopefully you can see it. HE04, right? Says in the manual, it's an HT107 763 2A. In the instructions, the two SA 763s are replaced with KSA 992s. Now, instead of a 763, it's a 750. That's okay. So we'll still replace it with the KSA 992s. And that's the kind of thing you're going to need to be aware of, is if you're not sure, go look it up. But that can happen. And common sense says, okay, it should be a 763, it's a 750. Maybe they were out of 763s in the factory, so they use the other ones. Same thing. Okay, so this is a, let me get it close, KSA 992, which is the replacement. And what you'll want to do is spread the legs on it a little bit so it goes in the holes. And then we're going to look at the board where we took that out of. And that was the HE04, which is right here, if you can see with my finger. And it's right next to this resistor, which you can just move over slightly. You can move, you're not harming anything. And you can see that directionally we have, and it's hard to see, in some of the others it's easier to see, but the flat side is by that resistor. And with ECBs, the E is always the left leg, C in the middle, B. So you know you want it facing the same way the other one came out. We'll push it through the holes, get them lined up, and they can stand up a little bit. And now we come to the back and push that over, and now that's going to stay in place. Just like we did before, I'm going to show you how we solder those spots. First thing I'm going to do is put a little dab of flux on the spots we want to solder. And the purpose of flux is so you don't get oxidized, you don't have oxygen in the solder, which will create oxidation, blah, blah, blah. You can look it up online what it is. I'm going to do this very carefully, and hopefully I don't block the camera. As I said before, it's hard to do. I'm going to put a little blob on there, and then feed the solder to the spot. And like I said, you don't need a lot of solder. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing, a little blob. It draws it in. That's two. And now let's do the third one. A little blob, feed it in, and they're done. It's as simple as that. They're nice and shiny. I'm gonna look close up. Yep, they've gone down the barrel. They're nice. And I could check continuity, like I showed you before, to say, hey, am I really getting a connection across the pathways? So that's that for now. I'll move on, replacing some parts and show you in some other sections. Also show you when we desolder the potentiometers and clean those. Don't forget to go back and clip, and why we do that is not just so that it's clean, but that there's no chance of a leg sticking out and shorting to something else. You notice all of the solder from the factory is cleanly clipped off, and that's why. And as you can see here, this is what I removed from that spot. And you can see the little plus sign that tells you the orientation, that on these, the negative side is with the stripe. So the positive side is the other way. The positive side would go outward. And I was able to pull that out. The solder sucker, the the braid and the solder sucker worked very well. And this is, hopefully I can get this on camera. This is one of the 35 volt 10 UF capacitors. And we have the replacement for that. Let's get this on camera. Hard to do when it's zoomed in like that. Is 63 volt 10 UF. You can always go higher in voltage. So that showed you taking one out, but let's get the other one out, which is just above it. And that is, you look at the orientation, the pins are going up and down. So when we look here at the pins going up and down, it's fairly easy to see that it's these two here. So I'm going to use the desoldering gun, and hopefully you'll see this work fairly easily. It melts it and take it right out, and do this one. It melts it, takes it right out, and I see a little bit that it was stuck. Okay, so now for that one, I'll just pull it out. It seems like it's still, oh yeah, there's still a little bit of solder there. Where are we? There we go. And it comes right out. And this one should also be, yes, it's a 10 UF 35 volt. So what we're going to do is, looking at the board, right? Negative is the stripe side, which is going to go away from the plus sign. We're going to slip that through, turn the board over, and don't know if you can see this. I'm just going to pull the pins to one side so that it stays in place. Okay, and we'll do the same with the other. Again, plus side is towards us, so the negative is going to go inboard. Slip it through the holes. Push it down to the board as close as you can. Doesn't have to be touching the board. And we'll pull those to one side. And now those would be ready to solder. So now that we have those in place, I'm going to show you how we solder them in place. The first thing I like to do is put just a little dab of flux on each. Always have to use flux. Always have to use flux. I can't say it enough. People dry solder and then wonder why they don't get shiny stuff, or they get cold solder joints and everything, or oxidation. Okay, I've put a little bit there. I have my solder. I have my soldering iron, which I actually had a little hotter for when I use the solder braid. It doesn't need to be quite that hot. And move this. This is very easy to do. Let me put my light on. I have a magnifier on. And you'll see what I'm going to do is just touch the tip of the soldering iron to just get a little bit started. There, that one leg is in my way. There we go. And I got a little blob. Make sure the pad is covered. Whoop. There we go. And do the next one, which is some of them are very close. That one's done. Get a little shiny. And let's get a little blob on the end. My own glasses are in my way. That one. And let's get this one. And make sure those are not touching. They are not. And that's how you would do it. So as we move down the board, I wanted to point something out. I've replaced some transistors, capacitors, and then we get to these two capacitors here. They're 1 UF. And then we have some more transistors, some 3.3s, and then a couple more 1 UFs. A lot of times with the smaller UF ratings, instead of using electrolytics, especially if they're in the signal path, we replace them with the WEMAs, which are non-polarized, meaning it doesn't matter which direction they go in like the electrolytics do. And they're just a little better quality for those small UF ratings. I mean, I have spares. I could literally change these 3.3s to WEMAs. But generally I save that for when they're really small, like 0.47, 2.2, things like that. But you'll see when we're finished with the board that these are going to be in place of the two, actually I had them backwards, the two gray ones and the two orange ones. The two orange ones back there are 3.3s. Okay, so the tone board is now finished. All the caps have been changed, the transistors have been changed. And on the other side of the board, just when I finished up, I used the multimeter to check continuity on traces for anything I replaced, just to make sure. You know, it's always good to double check while you have it apart. Better to find out you might have a problem now than later on. So as promised, we are going to take off the potentiometers so that we can clean them. And I'm going to show you how we do that. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is one at a time. And the reason I do that is I'm not 100% sure if they are different, but you know, I think they are. I like to take out the potentiometer, clean it, do what I need to do, and then solder it back in. And then do the next one, and do the next one. That way there's no chance of mixing anything up, because you don't want to do that. So we're going to take the handy dandy desoldering gun, and hopefully I can do this so you can see it on camera. It's probably going to block, but it's the 6 large blobs there that you see. So we're going to start here. And we got 1, we got 2, 3rd one, 4th one. I'm going to do this one. I'll show you why. Sometimes they bend over a tab. So what you want to do is get the majority of the solder out, and then you can use the end of this, see, to push it up a little bit. And it's already wanting to come out. So let's see if I can pry this out. Or is it Still have a little solder holding it in. Oh yeah, there's one flipped over there. I didn't see it because I wasn't close enough. There's actually two flipped over. There's this one, which we've got that one, and now this one is, see, the tab needed to be bent back a little bit. And we'll do that again when we put it back in. We'll bend it over. Whoop. Not hurting anything. Okay. That should come out now. Just a little wiggling and it's out. And you can see it there. Now, why did I take that out? Well, as I pointed out to you, let me unzoom the camera. As I pointed out to you, if you try to put deoxit in the way you could see it before, there's no way to get in here really except for there. But look at the bottom. Okay, so now I can get in there with the cleaner. And let's move the camera back and we'll show you. And we're going to use the deoxit. I'm going to spray right in there. And this one too. I should be a little neater in doing it over a paper towel, but I didn't. And you can hear it. And I'm just freeing up any oxidation that may be in there. And let's get a paper towel. Get the excess off and out of there. Oh yeah, I can feel it's much easier to move. And that would have been probably the base, yes. Because it's upside down and reversed, so. And another thing I like to do, and I'll show you this. Hopefully we can see this on camera. If you look at the pins straight on, you see that one's a little bent in a different direction. So I just take a pair of pliers, right, and I just squeeze it straight. And I'll squeeze that one straight. That way they go in straight, and then you can always bend them over on the board. Not done yet. Remember we said after the deoxit, we use the fader lube. And that just keeps it lubed up. And we'll spin that. Different directions. Okay, we'll clean that up. Get the excess. I'm getting the excess off, cleaning anything on the... These are actually pretty clean. Sometimes you'll see these pins being oxidized. And these are actually pretty good. If they were, I'd be cleaning those too. But they really didn't need it. And you can blow these out with air to get any additional residue out. This will pretty much evaporate, you know, the excess, but it's not a bad thing. Okay, so now I'm going to put it back on the board, and it can only go in one way, all right? But what you want to do is hold it tight up against the board, and then bend at least two of these, where's my screwdriver? Bend at least two of these tabs over so that it will hold tight to the board while you solder. And you can do 2 or 3 depending on what you want to do. I'm not scratching the board, I promise you. Okay, see, so now that's really tight to the board. So when I go to solder this, and you'll see, let me adjust the camera. You'll see them. You see a couple of them are bent over, but that's all tight to the board. So what are we going to do? We're going to use a little flux on each of the spots here. And since they're bigger, we're using a little more flux than we do on the smaller. And we're going to heat the pads and get the solder down in there. And there we go. Okay. So now, here's the thing. Can I do this on camera where you could actually see it? Potentially. I'm going to try. If I take off the lighting, I'm going to give a little blob on the end of the thing to get it started. And you feed it. Oh, this is hard doing it behind the camera. There we go. Touch that up a little, make it shiny. Let's get the next one. Like I said, this is hard doing back here, but we're going to feed it the solder and get that pad covered. I'm going to do the next one. A little more on the pad. Nice and shiny. And we'll do the next one. Feeding it the solder as we go, as we heat up that pad. In case you can't see what I'm doing, I'm not just touching it on the pin, I'm touching it on the pad, and I'm feeding it so that it feeds to the pad as well as the pin. And last but not least, get a little blob on there and see if we get the pad all nice and hot and the pin all nice and hot. Oh, that one needs a little more. There we go. Okay. And hopefully you can see that. They're all nicely done. They're not very much different from the ones to the left, you know, from the factory. And we could clean that up a little bit with, get the stuff off with a little alcohol. Whoop! Doesn't matter, it evaporates. And I'm going to be cleaning these boards when I'm done anyway. But it's just to see, did I get everywhere I needed to and not over? Like, see there's some flux that would make it look like it's touching the other pad, but it's not. And I can even, see, dab that, get the extra off. But as I said, I'm going to be cleaning these boards anyway, top and bottom. Top is actually easier than the bottom. Because the bottom has all the flux, the top is just dust and things like that that you need to get off. All right, so we did number 1, and I don't need to show you to do 2 and 3. It's going to be the same exact process, but I wanted to show you why it's better to take the potentiometers out to clean them. As I said, there is no way to clean them from the top. There is no way to get in there with the deoxit in the fader loop. Okay. Onward. Okay, so we're finished with this board, and we've cleaned the bottom. Let's get all the flux off of it, and the top is nice and clean, and all the parts are on there. The potentiometers have been cleaned, and now it's time to get it back in place. And this is pretty easy. It's just a matter of getting it back in the holes that it was in. And I'm going to do that right now. Be careful, you know, you're stretching some wires and stuff, but there we go. We've got it back in place, and it's going to hold in place when we put the nuts and washers on. So I'm going to just get it started. I'm not going to torque it down yet until we get everything in place. We got that one. Let's get the middle one. Let's get that in place. And the top one. So we'll grab our 12mm socket, and I'm going to tighten down the center one first, kind of get everything aligned. And we'll start this tight one, and it's just basically hand tight at first, just to make sure everything's lined up. Yep, everything feels good. So now I'm going to just give this a little tighter turn, give that a little tighter turn, and give that a little tighter turn. And we're good. Yep. So now we have the bass, mid-range, treble, and we're done. And if you look at the back of the board, like I said, it's nice and clean. Gotten all the flux off of it. You're gonna say, well, how'd you get all the flux off of it? Well, not with alcohol. The top of the board I clean with swabs and alcohol because it's mostly just dust, right? And I use these kind of pads, okay? But on the bottom, you're gonna be shocked. Yep, brake cleaner works good too. You can use alcohol on the bottom, but what happens is you wind up just pushing the flux around, and you don't get as much. Let me show you a used one. You don't get as much off as like when you use the gum out or brake cleaner, which actually takes it off the board and does not harm the board in any way, shape, or form. You're not spraying it on the board, you're spraying it on these and then cleaning. So a little tip there.